Okay, yeah.
Hi everyone, welcome to Rapid Fire episode 6. I am so excited to host this event for you guys, especially with the lovely panel that we have today. This is the women's special, first time on the Rapid Fire series, and I couldn't be more excited to have this panel. Just a quick one-liner about me. I'm a brand consultant and a storyteller. I basically help emerging and high-growth startups tell their stories, and Rapid Fire is my passion project that I do every 2 weeks. I obviously blast everybody's LinkedIn and WhatsApp with the messages whenever it happens. So stay tuned. If you don't already have me on LinkedIn, do definitely follow me because that's where you'll get all the updates. Quickly over to the panel. If you guys can quickly just introduce yourself one by one and let us know a little bit about yourself, that would be lovely.
I'll start. Hi everyone, this is Akanksha Dhawan. So my journey started a decade ago as an entrepreneur, where I would say I fell in love with problems first and marketing came later in my life. I started a travel venture for university students and a social venture for slum dwellers in Punjab. Uh, all of that landed me in Micah Ahmedabad. I graduated out of it best 2 years of my life. Joined Wipro as a brand manager. Did some great work there. I'm currently working with State Street. It's an American investment bank. I'm part of their global marketing team. So yeah, that's about me.
That's
Looking
awesome. It's
forward
so
to a
nice
great
to have you
discussion.
here. Yes, same.
Thank you.
Kriti, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Akansha. Thank you, Vanshika. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Krati Khandelwal. I lead product and brand marketing at Haptic. I've been doing marketing for about 6 years now. I'm one of those few marketers who voluntarily chose to shift from B2C to B2B marketing simply because I was curious. So, yeah, I have a fair idea of both sides of marketing. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here.
Thanks. Lovely to have you. Nihar, tell us a little bit about
Awesome.
yourself.
Thanks for introducing yourself, guys. Hi, I'm Nihal. I'm from Delhi. I did my journey isn't as long yet, but I did my economic honors at the Lady Shri Ram College in Delhi. After which I joined Anheuser-Busch InBev, which is basically the largest global beer company. I did marketing there for 3 years. I worked as an experiential marketing manager, then a brand manager. After that, I moved on to the Adidas Group. I'm currently working on the brand team for Reebok, and I think. I've enjoyed marketing so much. Like I've just been super excited to work on consumer-facing brands, young lifestyle, high energy stuff. There's always so much to learn, so I hope to continue to do that. And I'm really excited about today.
Thanks. So lovely to have you. Ria, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi guys, I'm so excited to be here. I am Ria Daga, and I basically, as a kid, I really liked marketing. I found it very interesting and a mix of creativity and analytical skills. So that's why I started my journey pretty early on. My bachelor's is also in marketing. I studied in University of Leicester in UK, and after that, I joined an agency, Merkel Socrates, where I got to do a hands-on training on all the marketing channels. I worked there for about 2.5 years, and then I decided to maybe challenge myself a little bit more, and I shifted to brand side, and now I'm working at Purple, which is a beauty e-commerce startup, and I'm handling digital marketing as well as organic. And because it's a lean team, I get to do a lot here. So I'm really enjoying my journey. So excited to be here.
That's awesome. All right, for all the new people, and I did do a quick check, there are about 67% new people over here amongst the people that registered. So just to give you a quick lowdown on the format, everybody will have 1 minute to answer a question. The first 5 questions are going to be in alphabetical order, and then they switch backwards so that we try to challenge all of these marketers we have here. Questions are very simple, but they'll cover the entire marketing sphere and all the different aspects. And I'm really excited to hear all your different views and opinions because you all come from a very different background. So let's get started. Usually this event starts with audience questions. So I'm going to pick up the first 5, which are all audience questions. So let's get started. The first question is, and it comes from Pranjal. She asks, what's the biggest challenge you faced during COVID being in marketing and how did you overcome it?
Okay, so I'll start. I think the biggest challenge my brand faced as part of the crisis is putting any communication out without having a consumer empathy angle to it. when this crisis started, we were very panicky about it. That there's a thin line about putting your message out and also being conscious about the consumers and our institutions who conditions that's there. So I think that was the biggest challenge. But we could manage it quite well by first understanding what the consumers are going through, and then pushing out our message and how can we help them. So the strategy changed there. The empathy angle came first, and then our product or service came in.
Got it. Kriti, go for it.
Yeah, so I think I'll take it in two parts. So one is obviously the communication angle. We had to sort of rethink the entire marketing strategy, right? Wherein you had certain budgets allocated to events and offline activities. You knew these are things that won't work anymore because everybody is sitting at home. So we had to do a revised strategy, figure out our revised GTM as soon as possible, because the world has sort of already started living in a COVID world. So changing the messaging was one part of it. The more difficult part, I would say, was getting consumers' attention, right? Because in the way things are right now, it's not a great mindset for people to buy something or think of buying something or investing in something. So because everybody is more of in a wait and watch mode or in a panic state to first figure out what's going on within their own organization or at their home, right? And that's, I think, sort of has been very difficult to get people to listen to you right now.
Got it. Nihal, go for it.
So for us, I work for a retail brand, a sport and fitness brand, where apparel and products is what we sell, and that's how you get by. With COVID coming into the picture, of course, like stores were shut, all of our channels were shut, deliveries weren't happening, e-com wasn't happening. So essentially everything froze all of a sudden. And of course, we weren't spending on trying to promote anything either, because we weren't selling anything to people. So for us, obviously, inventory was piling up in the back end. We had a lot that we had to churn out, a lot of campaigns in the pipeline that had been planned that we had to completely freeze, and we had to almost delay that. But what we realized, there was actually a lot of opportunity in this as well. We really saw that people all over the world were actually turning to fitness and health and just like positive motivation to actually get themselves through this. And I think working out from home and being fit and active actually just almost became like the motto and the trend for a lot of people. So we, of course, realized that we should be giving people what they're looking for and what will actually help them. So what we did is we created a lot of content with a lot of trainers across the country to give them workout plans from home. We did live sessions about how holistic fitness and positivity for the mind is really important at this time. And also just we did a lot of people with a lot of things for the frontline workers that are helping with COVID and rewarded them with some of our products.
Got it.
So yeah.
Got it. Riya, go for it.
Yeah. So I think the number one thing for us was to kind of unlearn the consumer behavior that we had mapped out for about years. And beauty is something that's personal to everyone, and you might still indulge in it, but the method might completely change, because now you're not going outside or going to parties, so just to unlearn and realize how are people actually using beauty now, whether it's more of skincare, whether it's being at home, not so much of sunscreen, things like that. So we had to really talk to our consumers, see some consumer research reports, do some surveys and stuff. And that's how we could understand how we can and according to that, we had to switch our communication, our product line, and everything according to that, right? So just unlearning and learning how it is in a COVID world was a major factor for us.
Got it. All right. All of you did this in under a minute. I'm super impressed. All right. Next question comes from Vishal. He asks, how does one differentiate between brand and performance marketing in terms of teams, metrics, and management?
I didn't get the last part. Can you repeat?
How does one differentiate between brand and performance marketing in terms of teams, metrics, and management?
Okay. So I would say there's a fundamental difference in branding and performance marketing. One, of course, is a very long-term sustainable activity, and that goes on. While I think performance marketing is sort of a drip activity which you keep doing on your brand. So that's the fundamental difference. In terms of teams, I think performance marketing needs very agile teams that need to be focused on a brand or a product or a service, while brand teams are central and core to the overall hierarchy. The message has to be very, very different. While performance marketing is action driven and it will be focused on conversions, I think brand will speak to the consumer at an emotional level and derive higher order benefits to them. So the key purpose of both of them are different. Metrics, I think, again, will be a very, very crucial element here, while brand would be, yeah.
That's what the buzzer sounds like. Go for it, Kruti.
Yeah, I think Akansha covered quite a few good points. So I think the basic fundamental difference, if I had to say, how would I define difference in team for brand and performance, will obviously be somebody on the performance side needs to have a much better understanding of data, because that's something that really runs the entire performance piece of performance marketing. Brand marketing, on the other hand, I'd expect the team to be more understanding of consumer. So have a much deeper understanding of consumer, relate to consumer emotions, and have the capability to build stories that can make your brand stand out and build a loyal customer base. So that's, I think, two basic differences that I would define between brand and performance marketing. Again, in speaking in terms of metrics, it's one of the most difficult part. As somebody who's been doing brand marketing for 6 years, justifying your brand marketing efforts is one of the most difficult part. Like it's too hard to attribute, right? But I think eventually it's a very long-term process. So you know how they say there's no shortcut to building a brand. It's just that you have to have patience. You have to keep on doing things.
Yeah,
I think
go for it.
So, I mean, I think they both covered some excellent points. I think brand marketing is a lot more, it's a lot more based on sustainability and longevity. So it's all about the storytelling and how you actually emotionally connect with your consumers. And it's ultimately what is going to attract people to your brand and actually give them a reason to believe. Whereas performance marketing is, of course, a lot more logical, a lot more results driven. And there's always like a more tangible ROI on what you're doing for performance marketing. But I think the lines are definitely blurring with, the way the world is changing now. And I think a marketer has to be both brand and performance oriented. And I think teams that are able to achieve that balance are actually the ones that succeed. I think, at least for the team that I'm working right now, we're a fairly small team, but everything that we do, we're all involved in both the performance side of things as well as the brand side of things, so that you're very aware of how well your marketing efforts are actually doing, and what difference you're actually making. And I think that is basically the difference. But I think they definitely have to marry, meet, and come together at some point, because whatever you create, if you create an excellent piece of content through brand marketing, the platforms that you leverage it on and the results that you want it to see is only going to come from performance marketing.
Got it. Riya, go for it.
So I think everyone has, talked very well about the difference and how they go together. I'll maybe build on that and talk about how we can probably go about measuring it. And I think brand one is a tough one, and but there is no hard or fast rule for brand marketing. How can you measure it? But I like to look at more engagement sort of matrix. If the sessions are increasing, how much is the session depth? How are they engaging with the elements on the landing page? Things like that. And also there are some indirect efforts. Like for example, you might not be able to get it from your brand marketing campaigns, but if you can see that there's a surge in your brand queries, if your search impression share is maybe going low because there are more queries, something of that sort, you can see an indirect effect in that sense as well. And obviously performance marketing comes down to ROS, your cost per transaction, your retention rate, and things like that sort.
Got it. Wonderful. I think you guys now know what the buzzer sounds like, so that's a good update. Next question is also an audience question, and I plug these two back to back because they talk about very similar things. So Kartikeya asks, how do you synchronize branding / awareness and performance / sales driven marketing activities? So the first question, we talked about how to differentiate them. Now he's asking, how do you make that all happen together, where branding and performance work together in cohesion to make your product or goals happen?
Sure. So I think we touched a little bit on it, but I think that's the way to go forward. I think as much as we can squeeze this marketing funnel, the more successful our marketing efforts will be. So a lot of brands are doing that at the moment. If you see, they are trying to customize their existing properties, which I mean brand campaigns, and they're trying to repurpose them by on Instagram, on different social platforms. Like they're making stories out of it, they're making posts out of it. So I think that's a good way of repurposing assets, and then so that there is a recall in the brand campaign, and you are also talking the grammar of the channel there. The one example that's coming into my mind is what Cadbury did recently with Purple Heart campaign. So that's a very strong brand symbol which Cadbury has, and they digitalized the whole aspect of the Purple Heart, and they stood by a cause. So I think that's how they delivered some action along with the brand.
Got it. Jyoti, go for it.
Yeah, I think I like to first differentiate. So I really want to sort of bring this out that brand marketing doesn't mean that you don't spend money on it or there's no performance related to it. I think more or less the objective is what differentiates the two, right? When you're doing brand marketing activities, your objective is to primarily get people to know about your brand or keep the people that already know engaged to your brand or build loyal customers. That's your objective, right? Acquiring new customers is always an objective, business objective, but brand primarily works for how you can relate to your customers. Whereas performance, the entire objective is very lead generation driven, very driven towards certain targets and goals, right? So I think that's something that we need to keep in mind when we are thinking about both these activities. Even when you're doing brand activities, you need to think of it that what sort of your content really helps you. How is it helping a consumer? Will it help you in engaging a consumer or will it help you in converting a consumer? So I think that's where you need to sort of come together with your demand gen team and with your brand marketing team to figure out what are the various assets and how you can utilize them.
Got it. Nihar, go for it.
So I think it depends, what part of the funnel or what part of the growth stage your brand is in, of course, at that point. And I think the both of them rightly said that, insights, and I think just a lot of that feeds into what you even do at a brand marketing level, right? So you need to have a sense, and that, you need performance marketing tools to be able to tap into those insights for consumers. So whether it's social listening or whether it's to, quantitative and qualitative survey results, you need to be able to see what it is that you would like to bring alive even in your brand content. And once you do that and once you amplify that, all the results should be obviously looked at from a performance marketing perspective. If you also do create one particular campaign, it needs to have all the legs to be able to sustain itself across other platforms as well, whether it's your website, whether it's your social media handles, whether it's email marketing, whether it's all of that stuff. It needs to all kind of speak the same language and talk to each other for you to actually see results from it. So I think that is how the two need to come together and how you can kind of synergize the two and synchronize them.
Got it.
Yeah. So what I would say is there is when we talk about brand marketing, we're talking about the top of the funnel, and we're talking about performance marketing, it's exact bottom of the funnel. We can also think about the mid funnel right over here, and I feel that's how we can marry all of them together. If we really, so for evoking an interest, we have brand campaigns by which people will just know that there is a brand out there that does this. Then we can have the mid funnel, which can actually concentrate on getting some sort of engagement or getting them to consider your brand in all of the different ways possible. And then the performance campaign can only focus on getting transactions out of these guys. So if suppose you're running a video campaign for branding, you can have probably display campaigns which target the viewers of your ads who have viewed your ads, and then you just try to get them on the site or do some sort of small activity, and then the performance marketing campaign should be to get the transactions. In that way you would be able to see how the funnel is really flowing.
Got it. Okay. Next question comes from Priyanka. She asks, how do you maximize organic reach on social media through content?
Sure. I think it's a great question. I would say there are a couple of hacks through which you can do that. One is have a very clear focus on which kind of audience are you targeting, because if you do that, trust me, you would think that it's getting focused and it's getting leaner, but I think it's spread very quickly because you are targeting the right community out there. So I think I abide by one principle, that you don't build communities, you build for communities. So you have to build content for specifically those communities in mind, and it will reach the right audience. Use right hashtags which that community resonates with. Do some research of the right keywords and hashtags beforehand. Tag some nice influencers in your category, which your audience thinks they can resonate with. So yeah, these are the couple of hacks I would say for organic reach on social media.
Got it. Kriti, go for it.
Yeah, I think one very interesting hack that I sort of have started really using lately is especially for organic, because simply these social media platforms have so much paid media on it that it's very difficult to get organic reach, right? So what I suggest my team in general is to try and find somebody in that industry to give you an opinion. So write content first which is educational, that captures a larger audience. So don't keep talking about yourself or your brand. Think of it from a user's point and what they want to listen to. What is it that how is it helping a user? How are you planning on helping your users is the first thing that you should look after. Second is speak to industry leaders. So suppose if you're writing about something in insurance industry, if you're writing about say finance industry or whichever industry, even if it's a blog, don't just write it yourself. Just reach out to people, like how in normal sense journalists do for PR. They reach out to people and say that we know that you're an industry leader. Would you like to contribute to this article? And I think if you reach out to 20, I'm sure there'll be like one person who will come out and say, yeah, of course, that's I'll give you a quote on it. And if that person gives you a quote, he will also invest his time to promote it. So it gives you a much larger audience that way.
Got it. Yeah, go for it.
I honestly think that now with social media platforms so cluttered and so crowded and just full of every brand and every influencer trying to get their point across and trying to cut through all of that, I think it's really important to be able to land the message and capture your consumer's attention very early on, because the minute someone realizes that your branded content is extremely it's just far-fetched and it's seeming too brandy, they're just going to drop off, right? So you have to think from the consumer's perspective, what do they want to know? We as marketers sometimes get a little lost because we think that the most hi-fi kind of funda is what they want to listen to, but it's actually not. We have to be able to break it down for them so that they're being able to extract the message in the simplest way. And I think that is obviously step number one when you're thinking about it from a creation perspective. And of course, when you're talking about the organic way in which firstly, I think video content now works a lot better than just like static, because I think it conveys a lot more in like a shorter span of time. It feels a lot more real as well. And I think of course things like reaching out to the right audience, posting at the right time, hashtags, all of that stuff. But I think the first thing is actually the content that you are creating and how meaningful that is.
Got it.
Right. So I would like to start with, using content. I think it's very important that you are there on all the social media like channels possible. And to do that in an effective way, I feel like you should use one piece of content in multiple formats that suits that platform, right? Like you would edit it in a different way for Instagram, edit it in a different way for LinkedIn, something like that. So you can make the most out of the resources you have. That's number one. Secondly, I feel like even to posting on social media, there's a technical aspect and there's a consumer aspect. Technical aspect you can learn online, hashtags or time and things like that. But the consumer aspect is something that you have to empathize with your consumer, like Akanksha said at the start, right? What are their pain points? Can you make helpful content or relatable content, funny content, and kind of switch it up? Always run experiments so that that there is some other avenue out there that you still have to explore. If you're not experimenting much, you wouldn't have data points to understand.
Got it. Now for the fifth question, what are some of the benefits of actually this whole COVID situation and having a remote marketing team? Everyone usually asks about the challenges, so I wanted to twist it and see what are the good things that have come out of this.
So a lot of things actually. I would say our team has come really close in this time. In office scenario, it's very easy to ignore people because you see them on every day. But nowadays, I think we are being extra conscious and checking on people. So I think our team has become really close. From a business perspective, also, my company has benefited a lot because being in an investment firm, I think we have churned out a lot of different products which, let's say, monitor liquidity for our clients or help them make better investment decisions. So I think that way our team has been really agile and thinking on our feet that, what can we do to help our customers out there. So, and of course, like problems bond us and bring us together. So I think having gone through this together, I think it's become really close. And specifically for global teams, there was a divide in, okay, this is the India team, this is the London team, this is the US team. So I think all of this has brought the world closer.
That's awesome. Kruti, go for it.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'll start with family time. I think that's something that people are really enjoying, and the amount of time that they're getting to spend with family. Second is flexible.
Oh no, I think
people are doing all household work because of the way things are. So I think even as company or even as leaders, we tend to give a lot of flexibility now, and in which
no, I think she dropped off. Okay, Nihar, if you want to just continue.
Cool, I'll take it from there. I think she's back.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, do you want to continue?
Yeah, so I was saying second is flexibility of time. And I think as a brand, like Akansha said, I'm in a tech industry. So I think COVID has driven the biggest driver for digital transformation. So that ways it's been pretty positive for us. Yeah, I think these are three positive things that I can say that COVID has brought.
Awesome. Nihar, go for it.
So I think number one, I think the level of empathy that people have and just the attitude. Honestly, people have just gone into this mode where they are being really helpful. They genuinely do want to make a difference and trying to be as there for like that other employees and just like just do that. I think that's what's been amazing. Also, I think meetings have gotten a lot more productive. Things that were otherwise just like chats or things that would otherwise take very long have now got a very clear focus. And I think at least the teams that I'm working with, I'm seeing that the amount of times that teams are coming together now on the same call is increasing a lot, right? So you would often have like one-on-one conversations, but now like the fact that your whole team is there and you're all discussing something together has definitely been a big bonus. And I think that routine has really made things a lot more efficient. Other than that, I think the biggest opportunity and something that's actually been very exciting is the fact that there were no hard and fast rules. There was no right way of doing anything. So the amount of creativity that you were putting into everything that you thought of was just like a lot more than you've ever done before. So people were thinking of new ways of doing things, experimenting with different formats and creativity and stuff. And
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, and I was just, I think I lost my train of thought. Yeah, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, go for it.
I think the number one thing now is that, in Mumbai, I don't have to travel in traffic. So I'm saving on so much time. And so is everybody else. And I feel like with that extra time, everybody's doing something productive, whether it's working out or cooking and all of that. And I feel like because each individual member of the team is happy, overall the vibe of the team is much better. And people are a lot more motivated and creative. And I feel like we're thinking a lot more outside of the box instead of just being in the same place and experiencing the same things. And we can take on our personal experiences and also add on to what is happening here, because all of us are going through something. We are also consumers of our company, right? So in that sense, I think it's really helping us to get a new perspective and be re-energized and like actually love working. So yeah, that's what I would say.
That's awesome. All right, so we're at the halfway point, and this is where the fun begins, because we're going to switch the order around. So it's going to be Riya, Nihar, Kruti, and Akansha. So the question now for you, Riya, is give us 2 to 5 places that you go to or people that you refer to who help you become a better marketer or give you knowledge about what's happening in the marketing domain.
Sure. So I think a big advantage that I think was blessed with was that I was in an agency. So, I built a bunch of a network that people are working on multiple accounts. So I think my agency contacts would be number one on my list. After that, it would be some of the contacts that I've made from LinkedIn, because I've recently gotten active over there. So, like head of marketing, digital marketing in Victoria Knox, and also some of the leaders on LinkedIn. I think are very helpful. Other than that, I don't like to read just on digital marketing. I like to read overall on marketing, because I think it's the same principles applied in different situations. So I like to read on Economic Times where they talk about the marketing things that's happening, or industry news. And I like to read Google case studies and product related case studies if I want like a channel strategy or something. I think that would be my main thing. But majorly, I think it's asking people curious questions. I think that's where I learn most, whether it's random people on LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Nihar, go for it. Nihar, can you hear us?
Oh yeah, I can hear you now. I think my connection was a little unstable. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Go for it.
Perfect. So I think, I think being a marketer, I think the sky is the limit, and there's always so much you can learn about, so much you can read about. Of course, like having mentors in your professional life, those are people that I definitely turn to, for advice and for just also learn more and just get feedback from them on things that I maybe shouldn't be doing. But I think other than that, the internet and podcasts have been like a huge sort of learning space for me as well. I think there are 2 podcasts that I really three podcasts that I really do love. One is After Hours by the Harvard Business Review. One is Masters of Scale by Reid Hoffman. And the third is actually this podcast called Marketing School, where they have like these 5-minute episodes about various hacks and tricks that you can do. And like literally when I'm working out or when I'm biking or running, I listen to that and it helps me so much. And of course, other than that, there's always like, I think a couple of people in the team that, you know, you use as like bouncing boards almost, and people that always want to ideate and experiment with you. So I've always found at least that one person in every team that I work with, which has been super nice. I think that those are the things. And of course, reading on like marketing platforms like Ad Age and AFAX and stuff is always great as well, because you're always learning about new campaigns and stuff.
Absolutely. Kriti, go for it.
Can you repeat the question? Actually, my internet was a bit off.
So the question is, what are the 2 to 5 places that you go to keep learning about marketing and upskilling?
Okay, interesting. So I think the first one I would say is I talk to people. I think people have some of the best stories, right? It necessarily doesn't mean that you need to talk to marketing people or you need to talk to mentors. Anybody and everyone around is a consumer of certain product, right? So you always get various consumer understanding whenever you talk to people about brands. So like to give you an example, even when I'm driving through, I'll always keep looking at outdoors and talk about, you know, what how this messaging is. And sometimes it's really annoying for my friends, but it just sort of naturally comes to me that I keep on talking about advertising in and around me. So I think one is that you need to sort of, if you love marketing, it'll just come naturally to you that you keep talking to people about it. Okay. Some of the other things that I do is I read a lot of content on social platforms, because people nowadays have started talking a lot about what they've learned, what are the case studies latest going around. Other than that, I see Ads of the World, Agency Facts. These are some places that I find really creative what is going around. Yeah, so I think these are a few places that I go to, but my first priority will always be people.
Absolutely. Go for it, Akansha.
Yeah, so I think all of them made great points. And as Kruti mentioned specifically, that as if you are a marketer and you have that curious mind of knowing people and churning insights wherever you are going and talking, I think that mindset is always there, and you'll have that in the back of your minds, whether I'm listening to news, I'm listening to debates, I'm watching Shark Tank, whatever it is, I'm continuously churning ideas and thinking, okay, how can I use this, how can I use that in my ecosystem. But yeah, I think there are certain avenues that really helped me. My mentors, my last bosses, I think I have built a great rapport with them and continue to do so. Some case studies from Walk, Campaign India, these websites really helped me in drawing inspiration. Then one thing which I keep doing is I keep freelancing and working on new life projects. That really helps me to get some outside perspective and think out of my box, out of my industry, and get that new ideas.
Lovely. The next question is that, like, marketing is a super creative field and there's so many ideas and we need money for a lot of them. So how have you seen success in convincing these upper management to go ahead with your idea? Like, what are some tips and tricks that you use to influence and get them to say yes?
All right. So I think the number one thing you have to start with is, what is the senior management looking for? What is their objective? What do they want out of these campaigns? Once you understand them, then you'll know what are their pain points and like how can you convince and articulate your idea to them. So number one, you understand the brief. And then secondly, you come up with ideas that sort of match the brief as well, like something you might be excited about, but something that helps the brand also in an overall sense. And you make it, I think management is very concerned with, like, you know, specifics like how much budget are you going to require? What is the ROS of these campaigns? And what is going to be different this time? And like, are you experimenting? Things like that. If also you can help them with some case studies that, you know, maybe I spoke to a friend and he said that this worked out for them and this is the result they got. So maybe they'll be more receptive to it. So just letting them know the holistic view and your thought process, and also conveying how it's going to help them and their objectives. I think that's how I work about it.
Lovely. Nihal, go for it.
Yeah, I think honestly, just when you have to convince, more senior management stakeholders about the plan that you're trying to create, and if you truly want to do something path-breaking and different, I think creativity is number one. I think doing something out of the box, having the confidence that your brand is going to succeed because of that objective and because it's never been done before with a very clear approach is something that they always like. So I think whenever I have taken a large project to them that, hasn't been done before, I go with a very detailed plan, because I think the minute they know that you've thought about everything that plan could entail, whether it's, the drawbacks, the disadvantages, advantages, and we do like a bit of a SWOT analysis as well on what are the pros and cons. I think that really helps like believe in it a lot more and actually either put their budget in it or not put their budget in it. I think it also depends. Like the earlier company that I was working in, we had budgeted for like really large projects, but the creativity there was completely up to us. In the second organization I've worked in, here we do a lot of we experiment with a lot of things organically, and it actually works very well for us. So every brand is not always going to have the budget to support your extremely because sometimes good ideas require money, right? It's about finding that balance and showing them that you can still do it.
Got it. Pratik, go for it.
If I have to like give this a title, I'd say do your homework and don't give up on your idea. So I think the only way you can ensure that your idea is heard if you've sort of done your entire homework on what is how it affects, what is it been done before, what are the kind of spends, what are the kind of results that you can expect, and sort of formulate something that no matter what the question comes to, you have the answer to. And second is don't give up on your idea. Like have enough passion and enough trust that okay, this is something that's going to really turn into something big. And I think that's something that's really worked for me. Like I haven't people coming to me that it becomes like a devil's advocate session with you if we have to discuss your idea. So I think for me what's really worked is don't give up on your idea.
That's awesome. That's some really good advice. Akansha, go for it.
Yeah, so I think great points covered. I would just add by saying that the basic principle of knowing your audience really works here also, by the way. Know your management, know the person you are talking to really well before you get into that presentation. Because it really matters what that person is looking for. We all know that how our bosses are really different and they're looking for different things in their careers and what matters to you, as I think Ria also mentioned. So different people are looking for different things, and you have to hit at the right spot and make sure that your presentation has that covered. And then I think the rest part really becomes a smooth ride for you. And yeah, as Prithvi says that you have to be relentless and be really confident about it, and only then people will believe in you.
Absolutely. The next question is. Should marketers focus on building a very targeted email list? What are the benefits and what are the successes you've seen of building this email list?
All right. So I haven't primarily worked on email campaigns, but I know this just from my general curiosity. So I guess other people would be able to give better insights. But I think right now when we're fighting for attention on all sorts of social media platforms, right, where one day you might be big and the next day you might be small, which you see happening with a lot of influencers nowadays, it's very good to have this email list because people will still be using these emails no matter what, like for a long period of time. So that way it helps you. And also with email, the cost of reaching out people from an email is very less compared to paid channels and all the other paid channels. So in that sense, it would really help having an email list. I think that's all I can say about this topic.
Awesome. Please also do share some experiences and examples of email campaign successes if you've seen any in your career so far. Nihal, go for it.
For sure. So just like Ria, I haven't worked on email campaigns and I haven't worked in CRM, but like just reading up and just seeing what's happening around me as well. I know that at least email marketing, because it's very targeted and very focused, it gives you the freedom to actually communicate and land the message with the imaging and everything that you have in mind into someone's inbox, which is like landing straight there. So if someone sees it and catches their attention, they can very easily either click and go to your website, and the conversion there is usually quite efficient. Also, I feel like because social media is now a lot more about engagement and about emotional connecting, I think email marketing sometimes is very logical. It's very like to the point, right? So that also, I think building on that audience set that you have through email marketing is always very helpful. You can reach out to consumers that have already bought your product in the past with something else. Also, when you see certain search trends, this is something that we've tried. If we see certain search trends of products, we then create like a emailer for that product, and then we send that to people who we know would have probably searched for that, or people who have been our erstwhile consumers and now would want to maybe just like cross-sell to them. So I think from that perspective, email marketing is quite productive.
Got it.
Yeah, so I think I couldn't stress more on how important it is to have a targeted email marketing list, okay? Because just the way things are going around and the way the marketing is going around, I think personalization and account-based marketing is sort of the next big thing, right? Brands are focusing so much and investing so much on personalization for every consumer, and email marketing sort of offers you that in a very simpler way, right? Because you have the buyer's persona, you have the buyer's attention. However, I sort of say this in email marketing that you need to think of of content from a point of view that you're engaging your customer for a really long time, right? Because you can't expect to send one emailer and expect them to reward and transact. You need to keep them engaged. You need to keep sharing on content that makes sense to them. Keep sharing content that is more educational to them. Keep sharing content that is sort of their pain points. And I think that's one channel that will eventually work very well for you. But yeah, I think it's the best way to personalize your content.
Got it. Akansha, go for it.
Yeah, so I think as all of them said, email marketing is very, very important, and I think it's worked for me really well in my career. I've worked from small I've used it in small companies, $2 billion companies, and I think in B2B scenario it really, really works well because it's really targeted. You can speak to the customer in their business language rather than targeting them on a social media platform. And the email list is there to stay with you. Your users might go off from the app, like what's happening with TikTok right now. Your social media can followership can go there any day, but your email list is going to stay with you. And I think targeted list is very, very important, but you should, as Kruti also mentioned, you should build on it, and you should do a lot of A/B testing, personalization, etc. And I think lead scoring really, really comes to help in this manner. You should use your email marketing in a good way on your warm to semi-warm leads to make them warm enough to have them in one of the campaigns.
Got it. All right. Next question is, should marketing start before product market fit has been achieved, or should you wait for product market fit after starting? So marketing before or marketing after product marketing fit?
I think everything has to start with your product marketing fit, and because that also means that you need to know your consumer. If you could still start marketing, but I think you would be achieving really high cost for everything. So it has to start with your product marketing fit and knowing your consumer, and only because those will act as insights for you to build your marketing campaigns on, and it can't go the other way around. It can help you to maybe realize some more things about your consumer and about your product, but you can't completely start from scratch. I think you would be wasting a lot of budget and time and a lot of experimentation to realize that. So yeah, it should definitely product marketing fit should start before.
Okay, got it. Nihal, go for it.
So I think product marketing fit sometimes takes a little bit of time for you to achieve, because for that you have to have reached out to enough consumers to actually know what your audience set is. So I feel like it also varies across industries. If you are a brand that wants to establish your storytelling and establish that connect with people, then you go the brand marketing way and you do something to be able to reach out to those right people, especially because you also have to break through the clutter, and you do have other competitors as well. I think performance marketing comes once you have a product marketing fit. So I definitely think the storytelling, reaching out to consumers, awareness has to be driven maybe even before you have a product marketing fit, because you can't just rely on that. It becomes very transaction based then, and then you might dilute what your brand stands for, right? But if you have a very confident and clear approach on what you want to be and what you want consumers to perceive you as, then I think brand marketing does have to have, an important position before you get into product marketing fit.
Got it. Kriti, go for it.
I think I'll sort of agree to Nihar a little bit here, but it depends from product to product as well. Like it is very different for different products. I think marketing also involves research. So even if your marketing side of things haven't started, you can always build your user persona, do research around your product and different markets. That's something that you should start. Either you've established product market fit or you've not established product market fit, because as a marketer, it's responsibility to have a say in that where exactly are your users and what are they looking out for. So I definitely say you should start before, but it just depends on the activities that you do before and the activities that you do after.
Yeah,
got it. Makes sense. Akansha, go for it.
Yeah, so I think I would say here that marketing comes first, then product market fit, because for me, marketing is not about communication. It's not about just outward communication. It's also about a lot of listening to the consumers, and getting to the right product market fit is also part of the marketing process. A lot of startups you see in the market change their products while researching about them. I've heard a lot of founder stories who started doing something else, and while the process of research, they found another deeper problem, and they built a new product out of it. So I think the marketing starts from the time you get that first idea or the problem, and then you go after it and make the right product market fit. And I think the rest just follows after it.
Unfortunately, but it's a really big myth. People tend to get marketing team after they establish all of this.
Yes, that is
Which is like a very
why
big
I asked
mistake.
this question. Like, where do you think it happens?
Yeah.
Yes, very good point. Very good point. The next question is influencer marketing in terms of spend and ROI. What are your opinions on it?
Oh my God.
So influencer marketing, I think it's a very powerful tool if you're using it right. You know, if you're taking out, I feel like instead of going for broader influencers that just have millions and millions of followers, it works out. It might differ brand to brand, but what I have seen in my experience is it works out if you're targeting more niche influencers who have a very strong hold over their audience and they get very high engagement rates, and you know, there's a specific audience that goes with them. So I would like to go for these sort of audiences, like, you know, even people who are popular in tier 2, tier 3, because audiences really resonate with them instead of somebody who's globally popular. So that would be number one thing. And also I feel like influencer marketing should also tie in with your performance marketing at some point. Like, you could, nowadays you see a lot of these testimonials that influencers do in general, and that's being used for your performance marketing. And okay, that's the time.
Nehar, go for it.
I honestly think, so I have personal opinions and they differ from, what we might do at work. But I think honestly, influencer marketing, I think somewhere it's gotten a bit lost and it's obviously become a very cluttered space. An influencer influences you because they've done something to be able to do that. And I think that matters, right? So the people that you have at the top of the pyramid, sometimes like the globally known people or people who like are probably like actors and, people who are in movies and stuff, they become influencers because they have that popularity and people are following them. So anything they do, people will kind of follow that. So I think that comes because it's a very mass reach. But I think when you're actually talking about a very specific customized reach, then you have to have some specialists and you have to have people who actually command what they say, right? So for example, if I work in a fitness brand and I get fitness trainers on board, I know people will listen to them because they're authentic and they have a voice in that space. But if I get someone who's promoting a different brand every day, I don't think that makes a difference at all. And I think that's what started happening. You literally have these influencers who are promoting 5 brands a day. So you're completely getting lost in that mess. And I don't think that works at all.
Yeah, you're so right. Kriti, go for it.
Yeah, I think I totally agree to Nehar. Finding the right influencer is the bigger challenge than if you want to do influencer marketing or if you don't want to do influencer marketing. So I think profiling your influencers is something that I always start with. See what they've done in the past. Are they like she mentioned, promoting multiple brands, and that's why people really don't trust them and they know that they're simply being paid for doing this. Again, the second point I would say, influencer marketing works different for different industries and different style of work, right? For B2C, probably influencer marketing works in terms of conversion or getting people to use your products. But when you come to B2B, it can only be used for reach or for getting people to know that you exist as a brand. You can never use influencers for conversions in general because it's just a larger, much larger product, right? There's a large investment that is involved. So it's only mainly for awareness used in B2B, and B2C it's primarily can be used for major things. But yeah, finding the right influencer is the key.
Got it. Akansha, go for it.
Yeah, I think great points out there, and I can't agree more to it that influencer and brand fit has to be really, really seamless. Otherwise, it'll do more harm to your brand than any good. Trust me, it'll come across so unnatural that people will start distrusting your brand and know that the influencer is bought out there. So I think that first the brand fit has to come really well. Second, it has to be in a very natural environment. It does not. It should not seem like the influencer is got ready to do your brand marketing out there. I recently remember one ad which Kusha Kapila did with Tropicana. It was a really smart ad. She actually was doing it at an airport situation where they are frisking it. Tropicana has frisking her. Tropicana has come up with a new pocket sized bottle, and she just kind of come across it in her pocket while she's getting frisked. So a totally off-brand situation out there where nobody would understand and think that it's going to be a Tropicana ad. So these kind of ads really work.
Love it. Okay.
But brands should definitely not be at the mercy of influencers, which I think has started happening now, and I think that is when they lose the plot.
Yeah, definitely agree. Ria dropped out, so Nihar, if you'll just take it and we'll continue in the same fashion. What is the difference for you between an audience and a community? Because a lot of times people confuse these two terms, being like, I have 20,000 followers, that's my community. But I come from the school of thought that your audience is not your community. So what do you guys think, and how do you explain the difference between these two?
Absolutely. So I think anyone could be an audience, right? Everyone is a consumer. Everyone is technically your audience. I mean, of course, people that fit, the targeting that you're going after. For example, if you have a certain age group, certain gender, so people have certain interests, they immediately fall into your audience, which could be a lot wider. So it's a lot larger, and you very often have not even reached out to all of them. So through your performance marketing efforts and through your reach and through all of that is how you actually reach out to your audience. But I think the community is actually people who resonate with your brand, people who are genuinely passionate about your brand and kind of represent your brand a little bit more. So communities are usually more tight-knit, more smaller, and I think they're usually people who for example, if a fitness brand, the community would be like fitness enthusiasts, right? But an audience could be even wider than that. So I think audience is always like a more close-knit circle of people who share the same interests as your brand and are actually thinking very actively, and it's occupying a very important mind space for them. Whereas an audience is just another consumer for whom you could tap into for a product sometimes and maybe not sometimes.
Love it. Okay, Kruti, go for it.
Okay, I think Nihar has differentiated really well. I think one differentiation that I'll tell you between an audience and a community is if you have money, you can acquire as much audience as you want. But building community takes time because you want people to be interested in you, you want people to know about you, you want people to like you. So I think if you build a community, you're definitely doing a wonderful job as a brand and as a marketer. Audience is something that you can acquire even through performance marketing. Like if I want audience in US, and if I have the budget, I can just acquire that audience. The important part is when they start trusting you is when they become a part of your community.
Yeah.
Love it. Lovely differentiation. Akansha, go for it.
Yeah, so I think lovely points made out there, and I would just refocus on that, saying that community for me is a subset of your audience. There are really, really engaged people out there who do not just buy your brand, but they advocate for it as well. McKinsey came up with a community, they just rejigged the marketing funnel and they came up with a customer advocacy loop that they had created. Just go and check out there, and it actually creates a subset of the marketing funnel, and people who are just tied in that loop, they buy it, they advocate it, and they bond with it. So I think that's a really, really engaged and supercharged audience who spread your word of mouth of the brands and bring in a lot of people from the outer funnel to the inner funnel. So I think that's the community.
Lovely. Ria, the question was, how would you differentiate or join up your audience and your community? Because like I explained earlier, I feel like I think of it differently, and I think everybody else as well does. So I'm not the only one. So what are your thoughts on audience and community?
Right. I think very similar to how Akansha, said it. Or your community is a smaller subset in your audience, and I feel like audience is probably somebody who's a probable consumer, who might buy an X product. But a community is something there's a deeper value that bonds them together. Like for example, a consumer could be that just buys sports shoes, but a community could be like fitness enthusiasts, something like that. There's a lot more conversation over there, which is why it becomes a lot more engaging. So I think the aim should be to get them from audience to community, because once you make a community, it's not just the brand that's provoking them to engage, the community is engaging with itself, and that's the biggest USP, I think.
Lovely, lovely. All right, so now we're going to do a quick rapid fire in literal terms. It's going to be 30 seconds long, and you have to talk, obviously, as if you can for the whole 30 seconds. So rapid fire, 30-second answers only. Got it? And we'll do the same way. So Ria, Nihar, Kruti, and Akansha. So the first question is, post on social media every day or not?
Wait, is it me first?
Yes, you go.
Okay, sorry. I think not every day, every other day maybe. And you could try every day and see if your metrics are shifting and if you're seeing less reach. But I think mostly it should be every other day, and then build your way up to every day.
Got it. Nihar, go for it.
I think it depends, how much a brand wants to truly communicate and how much they actually have to say to a consumer. If they start saying things that just for the sake of being there, people will literally unfollow you because it starts getting on your nerves, and you start seeing a pattern where you feel like they're not actually providing you with any value, and then you feel like you don't really have to always look at it. So your engagement will automatically go down. But even otherwise, as a practice, I do feel that not every day. I think every alternate day maybe is what is required. But again, it depends from brand to brand and industry to industry as well. You don't have to have a point of view every single day. It depends how valuable that is to people.
Got it. Kriti, go for it.
I think I'll echo the same. It entirely depends on the content that you're writing. So don't post anything just because you have to post something every day. I'm okay if you post twice in a week, but the content has to be good enough that people look forward to your post, right? And that's what you're trying to achieve from social media.
Got it. Akansha.
Yeah, I think it totally depends on the objective that you're trying to reach. If you have to launch a product in a week, you'll obviously blast your community out there. You'll talk a lot more versus a business as usual, wherein you can go twice a week or thrice a week. But I think span it out in between the platforms also. You can post Twitter one day, LinkedIn one day, and then interconnect all of those so that they talk to each other also. I think that's also very important.
Lovely. As a branding strategy, getting your CEO to post on LinkedIn, yes or no, and why?
A total yes. I think when your CEO or a senior management folk is like talking about your company, it shows that they also really believe in the company, and it adds a lot of value to your brand when somebody like that is speaking out. It's almost like an influencer speaking out, but they actually run the company, so there's a lot more credibility to it.
Love it. Nihar, go for it.
Definitely. I think it adds like a human aspect to your brand as well. It almost makes it feel like there is this person who represents that brand in like a human form almost, and I think it obviously adds a lot of credibility because what that person is saying, is ultimately it's an important piece of information. But of course, this message when done has to be from a much larger point of view and a much larger perspective. So it has to be an overview. It can't really be tactical information because then I just don't think it's as inspiring. It has to really kind of hit you and make you think. Yeah.
You go for it.
So I have a bit different answer for this. I think what most CEOs sort of tend to do as a mistake is they only keep talking about themselves and their brand, right? Which I kind of disagree to. I'd rather use an approach where I'd ask them to first build an opinion, right? Make yourself as a thought leader in a certain space. And that's when you should probably talk about usage of what your product is doing. So I think somebody who does this really well is Xiaomi's CEO, Manu Kumar Jain. Like, I think he really puts the product in his day-to-day life, and he just doesn't talk about his brand, right? He sort of has built a community of various things that he talks about.
Love it. Akansha.
Yeah, I think great points, and I totally agree that breaking that barrier and humanizing that person out there is really important. And I think nothing more than a CEO who's the brand custodian out there talk about it. It really works well. It's worked well for us also. Recently, after the George Floyd incident, our CEO tweeted about it, and he wrote a long blog on LinkedIn. And I think it's really worked well and strike a lot of chords with the community there.
Love it. So recently we've been talking a lot about Atmanirbhar and like vocal for local. So what's your favorite homegrown brand, or have you seen a great branding strategy done by any of these that you'd want to talk about?
All right. I mean, I don't know if it's the best, but it's a memorable one is what I can say, is like Patanjali and how he takes, he is such a good marketer without having to learn anything. Like he really, I don't know how to say it, but like he really captures his audience, and he seems so authentic and not even like doing it for money, but for like well-being and all of that. Like I feel for his PG, he's doing it so well, and like the numbers and revenue can really.
Okay.
Honestly, like this entire lockdown, I've just been trying more and more homegrown brands because I feel right now is the time to support them. I have 3 favorite homegrown brands. I'll stress on one, but I'll tell you the 3 anyway. So one is Nykaa. I think they're doing a fantastic job. Second is Forest Essentials. I think stellar quality, and they're doing a brilliant job as well. And the third is Bira, which is the beer brand. I think they have also really shaken up the market, and they were the first craft beer brand to actually launch in India before all the other giants, and I think it's commendable. But the reason that I love Nykaa so much is I think they've built an excellent community, and they literally have like their own employees that are like the face of what their brand is, and I think it adds a lot of a personal touch.
Love it. Kriti.
I think Nihar sort of took my brand names because that's what I was going to talk about, Nykaa and Veera. Because I'll tell you what, Nykaa, I think it was so obvious that something like this was needed in the market, but I think nobody came up with it, right? And they just came up with it, and the way they've grown is simply like amazing, right? You know, like my mom uses Nykaa, you know, and you'll say that, okay, maybe Nykaa's positioning is very millennial driven and all of that, but like every woman knows about it, and the way they've built it in such short time is simply amazing. Like,
yeah,
I think it's a wonderful case study.
Love it. Akansha.
One brand that's really caught my eyes of late is Nicobar. It's started by an Indian couple. The lady's name is Simran Lal, and I love their branding. Just go to their About Us page and you'll spend like 15-20 minutes just reading about the brand and how they've told their storytelling. It's a really Indian brand. And it's, I think it's at a very close juncture of how they've dealt Indian sensibilities and Western appeal. And I love their branding, love their storytelling, and love how they build communities.
Love it. All right, so that brings us to the end of all of my questions plus the audience questions that everybody had asked before. Like I mentioned on the chat, we're going to pick 2 questions. We'll do it in the same 30-second format just because, you know, like it's already closing to an hour. So 2 questions. The first one comes from Ashwini, and he's basically asking, you know, are offline channels still a good channel for brand promotion, or do we shift everything online?
So I think it's not one way or the other. It's a marketing mix, and you need to still have offline channels to build on your online channels as well. So I definitely think it should be there, but at the same time, you can also see what is the cost efficiency of these channels. Maybe not invest so much, but every now and then have certain events and have certain personalized events where you can actually go and see these consumers, talk to them, and all of that, which might be a little bit tougher to see in a digital environment. So yes.
Got it. Nihar, go for it.
I think totally depends on the industry and the brand. I don't think every brand has to have an offline presence, but of course, offline presence helps with consumer-facing brands that showcase visibility and definitely add to the consumer experience. So I was working in a beer brand called Budweiser, right? Offline consumer experiential marketing was the biggest part of the way we advertise, because alcohol is so regulated in India. There are so many rules, that things that you can't do online, that building consumer experiences and moments on ground is actually what you rely on. But I think for all intents and purposes, the landscape has completely changed with COVID, and offline marketing now is kind of dead for the time being till things get back to normal.
Yeah, go for it, Kriti. Kriti, go for it.
I don't think she can hear.
Kriti, can you hear us?
Yeah, I think the key here is to know your audience. Okay, every product, every industry is different. Like if so, I've done real estate marketing in the past. Like, think about it this way, right? You're looking at an audience size who can buy a 5 crore house, who's 45 plus, and it's just not online. Probably is not the right way to reach them, right? That's probably a community that you build in a very different way. You build it through offline events, you build it through clubs and things like that, right? So it's entirely on who your audience is. And yeah, so I'd always go to this, and I believe a seamless approach on both is what is the key. Like, you can't choose either of one. It depends on your audience and a seamless amalgamation of the two.
Got it. Akansha?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it has to be a perfectly knit mix, and you have to juggle in according to your industry and the product. But I think nothing beats the touch and feel of your product or a service there. And it not need like mass media. You need not spend dollars on it. It can just be a retail shelf space, or just a kiosk, or at a POS, or an impulse purchase like place. So it can be those mini moments of truth which your consumer has with.
Got it. And now we are down to the last question before the session ends. This question comes from Vishal. He's asking, how relevant is using gated content in B2B for lead generation in today's time?
I haven't worked on B2B, so I don't think it would be right for me to advise anything. So I would like to pass it on.
Sure. Nihar?
Yeah, same. Haven't worked in B2B, but again, I just think that when you're working in B2B, you very clearly know who you want to go after, and you don't have to do that in a very public way. It can be done again to the right person at the right time, giving them the right message. And again, very very logical and sort of transaction based, perhaps.
Got it.
Yeah.
Kriti?
Okay, so I'll say it depends on the content, right? So if your content is really interesting, I'd always make it gated, because then I want people to sort of leave a lead for me, right? Because I've invested so much time in that content. But if it's a content which is just something that probably is not that interesting, or is more informational, or is more generic, I wouldn't add gated to it, because it just will lead to user drop-offs. So your content has to be something that actually user is genuinely very interested to know. So you need to decide on the basis of your content that you want to keep it gated or not gated.
Got it. Akansha?
Yeah, so I've used gated content strategy quite a bit, and I think it works really well. But as Kriti mentioned, you have to be really conscious there. Whenever your content is very long form and you have spent a lot of money behind it, for example, if it's a research paper and a study that you've done, give some snippets of it, give some insights about it in your web page, and make the rest of the full study gated. I think that strategy works really well. You have to educate your customers, your audience to an extent, and make rest of it for the more interested audience gated.
Got it. That brings us to the end of episode 6. It has been such a pleasure to host all of you here with us and have an audience of 30 plus people join us. It's been amazing. Thank you guys so much for spending your Saturday with me, with us, and this lovely concept that we've all come together and agreed upon. In just a quick minute, all the speakers are going to join you on the social lounge. So if you just click on a table, you can join that particular speaker's table, and please feel free to have conversations with them, ask them any questions you have, and have an open flowing conversation. Lovely to have you guys with us on Saturday. Stay tuned. If you do want to post about the event and help us get the word out even more, the hashtag is marketingrf. Do tag it, and we'll all definitely comment and help you and get your questions answered in case you haven't got them answered yet. Thank you so much. Take care and have a lovely Saturday.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.